I'm Amelia Monroe, 33 years old, and 3 weeks ago, I signed the papers on my first home, a modest 3-bedroom just outside Minneapolis. No help from my parents, no co-signer, no partner, just me and the years I spent on my feet in the hospital that night. I sat alone in the empty living room, sipping coffee from a paper cup, the walls still bare, my breath echoing against hardwood. I called my parents, hoping they'd be proud, hoping it would matter what came next. Didn't feel real. It felt like the floor dropped out beneath me before I go any further. Let me know where you're listening from in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button. If you've ever been made to feel selfish just for standing on your own 2 feet, I grew up in a quiet neighborhood on the west side of Minneapolis. My parents, Thomas and Diane Monroe, both worked steady jobs. Dad was with an accounting firm downtown, and Mom taught 3rd grade at Lincoln Elementary. We weren't rich, but the bills were always paid, and birthdays never went by without cake. My sister Tiffany is 3 years younger. We were raised under the same roof, but in completely different weather. I was the structured one, had my crayons sorted by color. At 6, balanced my allowance in a spiral notebook. Before middle school, Tiffany was a whirlwind of half-painted art projects and big emotions. She could charm anyone out of anything, including consequences. Teachers called me focused, called her gifted when she failed 2 classes junior year. My parents got tutors and drove her to weekend study sessions. When I made honor society, they barely looked up from her latest drama. I used to tell myself they were just trying to be fair, that they loved us the same but differently. After high school, I went to nursing school on scholarships and loans. I worked nights at the hospital and weekends at the campus library. It was exhausting, but steady. Tiffany tried art school, dropped out, tried community college, dropped that too. She bounced between passions and jobs, each more temporary than the last: event planning, pet grooming, photography. I lost track while she stayed in our parents' basement. I stayed in a 1-bedroom near the hospital, packed my lunches, thrifted my furniture, and saved what I could. Every extra shift meant one step closer to independence. One day, closer to something of my own at 33. After 12 years in Scrubs, I founded a little craftsman with creaky stairs and a red maple out front. Not fancy, just solid. It had a wide porch, a narrow driveway, and room to breathe. When I walked through it for the first time, the late afternoon sun poured through the living room windows, and for once, I let myself believe I was home. I invited my parents and Tiffany for dinner. The following weekend, I borrowed folding chairs, scrubbed the counters, and lit a candle that smelled like clean linen. The champagne stayed in the fridge untouched after they left. I washed 3 plates in silence, my father's last words echoing down the hall. We need to talk about the selfishness of this purchase. What followed would turn everything upside down. The dining room was quiet, except for the sound of silverware tapping against plates. I had set the table with care linen napkins, real glassware, even a store-bought cheesecake I knew my mother liked. Tiffany barely looked up from her phone. My father had just finished commenting on the backyard when he cleared his throat, pushing his plate back slightly. "Amelia, we need to talk about this house purchase." I paused mid-bite. "What about it?" He looked at my mother, who gave a small nod before reaching across the table to touch my wrist. "We just think the way you went about it, the timing, it felt a little self-centered." I stared at her, unsure if I'd heard right. "You didn't even talk to us," my father added. "We assumed you'd include Tiffany in the plan." "Tiffany," I repeated, glancing toward my sister, who finally put down her fork. "I mean," she said with a shrug, "you've got all this space, and I'm still figuring things out. It just would have made sense." My mother's tone turned soft, the way it always did when she talked about Tiffany. "You've always been so responsible, Amelia. You have a gift with money and structure. Your sister's more creative, more sensitive." I set my fork down slowly. "So let me understand. You thought I'd buy a house and just... What put Tiffany on the deed?" My father shifted in his seat. "Not necessarily on the deed, but it would have shown you were thinking about family, about sharing what you've earned." "Tiffany's almost 30, I said, trying to stay calm. "She's had support from you every year since she turned 18. I lived in a 1-bedroom for a decade, so I could afford this. I've never asked you for anything." Tiffany leaned forward, her voice rising. "That's not fair. Just because I didn't follow your exact path doesn't mean I've failed." No one said that, I replied. "But why am I expected to give up what I worked for so you can have what you didn't?" My mother's expression grew tight. "This house could have been a fresh start for both of you." "You mean for Tiffany?" I said. "She's never paid rent, never kept a job longer than 3 months, and now I'm supposed to give her part of my home." "She needs a stable place," my father said. "You don't need 3 bedrooms." I looked down at my plate, the food gone cold. I bought this house because I wanted something of my own, not to fill space, not to give it away. Tiffany folded her arms. "You've always acted like you're better than me, like having a job and savings makes you some kind of saint." "I've never said that," I answered. "But I did make sacrifices, and I don't think it's wrong to want the results of those choices to stay mine." There was a long silence. My mother finally spoke. "We just hoped you'd care more about keeping the family together." I didn't answer. I stood and began clearing the plates. No one touched the cheesecake. When they left that night, I stood at the front door and watched them walk to their car. My mother looked back once, but she didn't say anything. Tiffany didn't look at me at all. The next morning, I sent a message. I said I hoped we could talk again soon, maybe clear the air. Hours passed before my mother responded. "We need time to process." After that, I tried calling twice. My mother kept the calls short. My father didn't come to the phone. Tiffany never answered. But she posted cryptic quotes about betrayal, about being used and forgotten. One post read, "Some family only loves you when you're useful." Another, "Toxic people wear smiles." She didn't name me. She didn't have to. I threw myself into fixing up the house, repainted the hallway, refinished the kitchen cabinets by hand, planted a row of snapdragons along the back fence. Sometimes I'd sit on the porch swing after dinner, still in my scrubs, trying to make sense of it all. Then one afternoon, a letter came in the mail. Plain envelope, no return address beyond a law firm's name. I thought it was junk, almost didn't open it. Inside was a formal notice. My parents, Thomas and Diane Monroe, had filed a civil complaint regarding the property at 1269 Fremont Avenue. They were suing me. The claim said there had been a verbal family agreement that I would provide housing for Tiffany. It referenced financial contributions made to me throughout my life, which they now considered part of a shared family plan. I read it twice, then a third time, and still didn't fully believe it. Later that night, around 2 a.m., I found myself on the bathroom floor. My hands were shaking. I couldn't catch my breath. My heart pounded against my ribs. It felt like something inside me was breaking. The next day at work, I nearly gave the wrong medication to a patient. Natalie caught it before I did. At lunch, she pulled me into the staff break room. "Amelia, what's going on?" I told her everything, from the dinner to the lawsuit. She listened. When I finished, she didn't say, "I'm sorry," or "That's crazy." She just said, "You need a lawyer." She gave me a name. Lisa Bryce. The next morning I called and made the appointment. Lisa's office was in an old brick house across from the courthouse. Inside, it smelled like fresh coffee and lemon cleaner. She wore a blazer and no makeup, and she looked at me with sharp, steady eyes. I handed her the paperwork and told her what I knew. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "Legally, this doesn't hold up," she said. "But you can't ignore it. If they filed a claim, you have to respond." I nodded. "This will get expensive," I said quietly. She didn't sugarcoat it. She told me her rate, told me what to expect: discovery, mediation, maybe a hearing. Then she added, "If this goes your way, and it likely will, we can ask the court to make them pay your fees." That night, I sat on my bed with the file folder in my lap. I thought about every missed birthday call, every skipped celebration, every time they told me Tiffany needed them more. Maybe that had always been the plan. I just hadn't seen it before. The week after I met with Lisa, I stopped sleeping through the night. I'd wake at 3 a.m. and lie still, staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations and trying to find the moment everything shifted. At work, my hands moved on autopilot. I checked vitals, recorded meds, changed linens, but my mind was somewhere else. I skipped breakfast most days and pushed dinner around the plate at night. Natalie noticed. She didn't press. But during one late shift, she left a container of homemade soup in my locker with a sticky note that just said, "You're not alone." 2 days later, I was called into my supervisor's office. Jordan sat behind his desk, sleeves rolled up, expression gentle. "You've been off." he said, not unkindly. Not unsafe, just off. I told him a condensed version enough to explain without getting lost in details. He nodded slowly and said, "Take a week. Personal leave. Use it. We've got this covered." That week became a blur of paperwork and quiet. I spent most mornings at Lisa's office gathering documents, bank statements, loan records, texts. She took it all in without judgment, her pen moving steadily as I spoke. Then came the discovery process. Lisa submitted a formal request for all communication between my parents and Tiffany related to the house. A few days later, she handed me a printed exchange between them dated 2 months before I bought the property. Diane had written Amelia's looking at houses. "We should make sure Tiffany's needs are part of the conversation." Thomas replied, "She's always known that's her role. She just needs a reminder." That word reminder stuck with me, like I'd forgotten something I never agreed to in the first place. But the worst was Tiffany's text, sent just a week after I'd closed. She'd written, "They'll talk to her. She'll cave eventually. She always does." Lisa laid the papers on her desk and said, "We'll use this, but it's also a sign that their motivations aren't what they're claiming." I nodded, but my throat was tight. Lisa also requested a background report on Tiffany. I didn't know what to expect, but I didn't expect what we found. 3 credit cards maxed out, delinquent notices, a payday loan default, and a lease in her name on an apartment I hadn't known she had. When I asked Lisa if any of that mattered to the court, she said, "It matters if we can connect it to motive." And then she pointed to one line in the file. Tiffany's last known charge on her credit card and online gambling site. "She's not just struggling," Lisa said. "She's in a hole. And your house, that's their way out." The next week, Lisa submitted our response to the court. Then she called me one afternoon with an update. Preliminary hearings set. 2 weeks. I spent the next 14 days trying not to think about it. I painted the hallway a shade of warm gray. I scrubbed the tile grout in the bathroom with a toothbrush. I filled a notebook with grocery lists I never used. Then my cousin Taylor called. We hadn't talked much lately. She lived 2 towns over and worked long shifts at a logistics warehouse. "What's going on with your parents?" she asked right away. I hesitated. "What did they tell you?" Taylor sighed. "Aunt Diane's been calling my mom. Said you abandoned Tiffany. That you bought a house and refused to share it." I closed my eyes. "Did she tell you about the lawsuit?" I asked. "No," Taylor said. "A lawsuit I told her everything, all of it." When I finished, she was quiet for a few seconds. "That's messed up," she said finally. "I mean, I always knew they favored Tiffany, but I didn't think they'd go this far." After we hung up, I sat on the couch for a long time. The afternoon light shifted on the floor. That night, I dreamt of the house crumbling, the roof leaking walls, splitting furniture, sliding out the front door while I stood frozen. The morning of the hearing, I wore black slacks and a pale blue blouse. Lisa met me outside the courthouse. Her voice was steady, her presence solid. Inside, my parents were already seated with their attorney. Tiffany sat beside them, dressed neatly, hands folded. She didn't look at me. When the judge walked in, we all stood. Lisa leaned close. "That's Judge Harris. She's tough but fair." The judge reviewed the file in silence for a few minutes, then asked Tiffany's lawyer to speak. He stood and launched into a speech about family values, about unspoken agreements, about a shared understanding of responsibility. Lisa didn't interrupt. Neither did I. Judge Harris finally said, "Do you have any documentation of this alleged agreement?" He replied, "Not written, but the expectation was long-standing." She peered at him over her glasses. "This court doesn't work off assumptions. It works off evidence." She paused, then added, "Given the family nature of this dispute, I'm ordering mediation before proceeding. Lisa had warned me this might happen." The hearing ended. A mediation date was set. We left the courtroom in silence. I didn't look back. Outside, Lisa said, "We'll prepare. But don't expect miracles in mediation." I nodded. The courthouse steps felt steep. This wasn't over, and I was starting to understand just how far they were willing to go. The mediation was scheduled for a Tuesday morning at the Hennepin County Courthouse. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in the same navy suit I'd worn to my nursing school graduation. Lisa met me inside, calm as ever, and led us to a plain conference room with beige walls and a window that looked out over a parking ramp. The mediator introduced himself as Alan Phillips, a retired family court judge with kind eyes and a quiet voice. He explained the process said we'd each have a chance to speak, that the goal was resolution without trial. Then he looked at me, then at my parents, and Tiffany seated across the table. My father spoke first. We believe the most reasonable path forward is either transferring part ownership of the home to include Tiffany or selling and using the funds to purchase 2 smaller properties, one for each daughter. I looked at him for a long second. I've lived there less than 2 months, I said. I've started renovations. I've already invested money and time. That proposal isn't reasonable. Mr. Phillips nodded and turned toward me. Ms. Monroe, what would you consider a fair outcome? I folded my hands in my lap. I'm not giving up the house. I worked years to get it. But I'm willing to help Tiffany with a fresh start, first and last month's rent on an apartment if she chooses one she can afford. Tiffany scoffed. That's an insult. Rent money? That's not real support. It's what I can offer, I said. She leaned forward. You just don't want me in that house. You think you're better than me. That's not what this is about, I replied, keeping my voice even. This is about boundaries. Mr. Phillips held up a hand. Let's keep things focused. We're here to work toward compromise. There's nothing to compromise, Tiffany snapped. She has a house. I don't. That should be the end of it. Lisa sat back, arms crossed, saying nothing. I deserve stability, Tiffany continued, not a one-time handout. You deserve what you work for, I said, not unkindly. Same as everyone else. Tiffany stood up, chair scraping loudly. You've always resented me. Because you're jealous, I get support. I don't resent you, I said, but I won't carry you. Mr. Phillips gently called Tiffany back to her seat, but she shook her head. Forget it. I don't want anything from her. Then she turned and walked out the door, clicking shut behind her. The silence afterward was heavy. My mother wiped at her eyes. We may need more time, she said quietly. Mr. Phillips nodded. I'll report mediation was attempted, but unsuccessful. As we gathered our things, Lisa glanced at me. You handled that well, she said. I don't know if it matters, I replied. Outside in the hallway, I passed Tiffany leaning against a pillar near the elevator's phone to her ear. She didn't look up. That evening, I stood in the kitchen stirring a pot of chili. The house felt quiet, too quiet. I stared at the front window, watching the wind push branches against the glass. The next few days passed without contact from anyone on their side. Then came the notice trial date confirmed. The court would hear the case in 3 weeks. Lisa called and said, "We prepare now." She began assembling our exhibits. The financial records, the text messages, the property purchase documents. Everything had to be lined up precisely. During one of our final prep meetings, Lisa showed me a new bank record. They refinanced their house, she said, tapping a highlighted number. $50,000 pulled 3 months ago. She turned the page. $30,000 transferred to Tiffany the same week you closed on your home. I blinked. They gave her $30,000. According to this, yes. What happened to it? No trace, she said. Most of it's gone. The day of the trial, I woke early. I ironed my clothes and packed a folder with documents Lisa had already triple-copied. I arrived at the courthouse 20 minutes early and sat in the lobby watching people come and go. Lisa met me with a nod and a firm grip on her briefcase. It's just one more step, she said. In the courtroom, my parents sat to the left with their attorney. Tiffany sat between them, expression unreadable. The judge, Catherine Harris, entered, and the room stood. She looked over the files in front of her and asked their attorney to proceed. He painted a picture of family obligation, of shared understanding, of my so-called promise to provide for my sister. He mentioned childhood moments, said I had received years of support, that now it was my turn to give back. My parents took the stand next. My father spoke first, said they had invested in me with the understanding that it would one day benefit both daughters. My mother described family holidays, photos of us as girls said I'd always been the strong one. She wiped at her eyes more than once. Then Tiffany testified. She said I'd promised she'd always have a room in my house, that we'd talked about living together someday, that she'd counted on it. Lisa said nothing during their testimony, just took notes, nodding occasionally. When it was our turn, she began with a short statement. We've heard a story of expectations, not contracts, of assumptions, not agreements. She called me to the stand. I spoke about my years of work, the loans I paid off, the choices I made to afford a down payment. I explained that help from my parents had always come in the form of gifts or loans I repaid, never with conditions. Then Lisa submitted evidence of text messages, some between Tiffany and friends, some with my parents. One in particular stood out. Tiffany had written, "She hasn't said yes, but they think they can make her give in." There was a stir in the room. Lisa moved to the financial records. She showed the judge the refinance, the $30,000 transfer, the missing funds. Then she stepped back. Tiffany stood suddenly. "It wasn't their fault," she said aloud. "I told them it was business stuff. I said I'd pay them back. I thought if I lived with Amelia, it would be fixed." Judge Harris raised a hand. "Ms. Monroe, please sit down. You'll have another chance to speak if needed." Tiffany sat. My parents didn't look at her. The judge called for a short recess. Lisa and I stepped into the hallway. She didn't say much, just flipped through her notes. Back inside, Judge Harris returned to the bench and looked directly at us. "After reviewing the testimony and evidence, this court finds no legal basis for the claim against Amelia Monroe." She paused, then added, "This case should never have reached the courtroom." Then she turned to my parents' attorney. "The defendant's motion for legal fees is granted." I didn't move. I wasn't sure I could. Lisa touched my elbow lightly. "You're done," she said. But it didn't feel finished, not yet. After the ruling, I sat in my car with the keys in my hand and the engine off. The lot had mostly cleared out. The courthouse lights flickered behind me in the mirror, faint and distant. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just sat still, letting the silence fill in the places I couldn't reach. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. It was Natalie. "How did it go?" "Do you need company?" I wrote back. "Won the case. Would really appreciate a friend." That night, she showed up with Thai food and 2 bottles of wine. We ate on the floor of my living room, the couch still pushed against the wall where I hadn't finished rearranging. She listened while I told her everything: Tiffany's outburst in court, my parents' silence, the judge's final words. "You did the right thing," Natalie said. "All of it." I nodded, but I didn't say anything back. Not right away. The next morning, I got an email from Lisa. It was short and professional, outlining the next steps to collect fees and confirming that the judge's order had been filed. At the bottom, she'd typed, "Take some time to breathe. You've earned that much." I opened a cabinet and started unpacking dishes I hadn't touched since moving in. I rearranged books on the shelves by color, then by size. I cleaned the baseboards in the hallway and oiled the hinges on the kitchen door. I was home, but it didn't feel like mine yet, not fully. 2 weeks after the hearing, my doorbell rang on a Saturday afternoon. I wasn't expecting anyone. I'd just come in from planting herbs in the backyard. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened the door. It was my father. He looked tired. Not ill, just worn in a way I hadn't seen before. His coat was zipped up even though the day had turned warm. He held a small envelope in one hand. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped back without speaking. He entered, eyes scanning the space, taking in the framed art on the walls and the faint scent of lemon from the diffuser on the counter. "The house looks nice," he said. "You've done good work." I nodded. "Thanks." We sat in the living room. I didn't offer him coffee. He held the envelope in his lap. "Amelia," he said slowly, "I owe you an apology. What we did, going to court, we were wrong." I waited. "Your mother and I, when Tiffany came to us about her debt, we panicked. She talked about people threatening her loans she couldn't pay off. We thought we were helping." "You thought suing me was helping?" I asked. My voice wasn't sharp. It just sat there between us, even and steady. He sighed. "She told us you had promised, that you'd always said you'd make sure she was okay. We believed her. We shouldn't have. She lied," I said. "You still chose her story over mine." He nodded once slowly. "We see that now. We're paying the legal fees directly. Lisa should already have the check." I didn't thank him. I just listened. When he stood to leave, he hesitated. "Your mother wants to talk, but she's struggling. She's not sure how." I walked him to the door. He paused on the step. "I'm glad you have this place. I really am. After he left, I stood in the entryway for a while, not moving. The light from the window made patterns on the hardwood. I could still smell the fresh soil on my hands. A week later, my mother texted me. "Would you meet for coffee, just to talk?" We met at a small cafe halfway between my house and theirs. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair wasn't styled the way she usually wore it, and her nails were bare. "I'm sorry," she said before we even sat down. We ordered and found a table by the window. She held her cup in both hands. "Tiffany told us you'd promised to take care of her, that you changed your mind. She even showed us messages." "What messages?" I asked. "She edited them," my mother said. "Changed the context, removed parts, made it look like you offered and then backed out. You believed her over me," I said. "I did," she admitted. "Because it was easier, because I didn't want to believe she could lie to us like that." I didn't say anything. "Can you ever forgive us?" she asked. I looked out the window. "I don't know, maybe, but not today." She nodded, eyes full but not spilling over. "Could I see the house again someday?" she asked. "Maybe," I said. "When I'm ready." After she left, I walked through a small bookstore down the block. I picked out a novel I'd already read twice and a candle that smelled like cedar and clove. I walked the long way home. The weeks after that were quiet. I had dinner with Natalie and her husband on Thursdays. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, helped me replant the side yard with tomatoes and dahlias. Jordan from work invited me to a weekend cookout with his family. I didn't hear much about Tiffany, only that she'd entered some kind of outpatient program and found a job. I didn't reach out. Neither did she. One evening, I sat on the back steps watching the sky go from peach to deep blue. A breeze rustled the leaves of the maple in the yard. The porch swing creaked slightly in the quiet. For the first time since the trial, I exhaled and didn't feel like I had to brace for something. The worst had already happened. Now maybe I could begin to build something better. The house changed slowly. I replaced the shower head in the upstairs bathroom, painted the guest room a dusty lavender, moved the reading lamp from the living room to the den. It wasn't just about fixing things. It was about creating a space that felt like mine again. Work got easier. I stopped counting the steps from the nurse's station to each room, stopped second-guessing every order I entered into the chart. One morning, Jordan pulled me aside after shift change. "You've been solid lately," he said. "We've got an opening in education, fewer hours on your feet, more mentoring new staff. Think about it." I did. And a week later, I took it. Natalie and I started a routine Wednesday night dinners alternating kitchens. She brought her toddler once, and he colored at my dining table while we made pasta and laughed about the state of the world. I saw my parents occasionally. Coffee here, lunch there, always in public, always on my terms. They never asked to visit the house again, and I didn't offer. I started therapy that fall. A colleague recommended Dr. Mercer, a woman in her late 50s who had soft gray curls and a calm presence. Her office had 2 chairs, a bookshelf full of paperbacks, and a window that faced a maple tree. "You're grieving," she said after our second session. "Not a person, but a version of your family that never truly existed." That thought stayed with me for days. We talked about the years I'd played the role of the responsible one, the dependable daughter, the safe bet. We talked about Tiffany's chaos and the way it always seemed to rearrange the family around her needs. "You didn't choose that role," Dr. Mercer said, "but you lived in it for so long it started to feel like part of your identity." Outside of therapy, I found new ways to fill my time. I joined a pottery class on Thursdays. I walked with a neighbor most mornings before work. I started baking again, banana bread cinnamon rolls, anything warm that made the kitchen smell like something was healing. I also adopted a dog. A golden retriever mix from the local shelter. I named him Chance. He followed me from room to room, slept beside the armchair in the reading nook, and greeted every guest with a tail that wagged like a metronome. I didn't think I needed companionship, but he was good company. Winter came, then spring. On the 1-year anniversary of my closing date, I took the day off work and stayed home. I made coffee, sat on the porch, and walked through each room with the quiet sense of someone who had finally arrived. In the kitchen, the new butcher block counters had a faint lemon sheen. The bookshelf in the hallway was full. I'd turned the smallest bedroom into a writing space with a chair by the window and a blanket folded neatly across the back. In therapy, we talked about closure not as a finish line, but as a shift. The point where the pain no longer decided everything. "Tiffany," I asked one day, "should I try?" Dr. Mercer tilted her head gently. "Do you want to?" "I don't know." "Then wait," she said. "You'll know when it's time." I waited. Then one Saturday morning in late April, I saw her. I was at the farmer's market picking up tomatoes and early spinach. She was at a stand across from mine looking at a basket of strawberries. We made eye contact at the same time. I almost didn't recognize her. Her hair was pulled back, her clothes plain. No makeup, no layers of statement jewelry. She looked quiet. "Amelia," she said. Her voice sounded different, like she hadn't spoken much that day. "Hi." We stood awkwardly, surrounded by people and flowers and the hum of conversation. "I'm working at the Arts Center now," she said, "full-time, teaching kids, admin stuff too." "That's good," I said. "I'm glad." She nodded. Then she hesitated. "I'm sorry for what I did. The lawsuit, the pressure, all of it." I didn't answer right away. I looked at the market around us, the people walking the morning sun, warming the pavement. "I was in a bad place," she added, "but that doesn't excuse it." I nodded once. "Thank you for saying that." She looked at me, almost uncertain. "Is your house nice? Are you happy there?" "Yes," I said. "I am." We exchanged a quiet half-hug. She said something about getting back to her car. I said maybe we'd catch up another time. Neither of us said when. As I walked back to my car, the tomatoes in my bag bumped gently with each step. I didn't feel joy or sadness, just a strange stillness, like a door had closed behind me without making a sound. That afternoon, Chance curled up at my feet while I sat on the porch swing, the one I'd bought when I first moved in. I watched the breeze move through the trees. The house didn't just belong to me now. I belonged to it too. The months that followed moved slowly but with a quiet certainty. I started to feel the rhythm of something new, a life that wasn't built around crisis or cleanup. It was subtle at first. A Sunday morning spent reading on the porch, a Saturday afternoon spent rearranging furniture just because I could. Natalie and her husband invited me to every major holiday: Thanksgiving, Easter, 4th of July. Her toddler insisted on calling me Aunt Mel, and after a while I stopped correcting him. Mrs. Chen, my neighbor, taught me how to plant cherry tomatoes from seed. She brought over cuttings wrapped in damp paper towels and showed me how to prepare the soil. That summer, I harvested more than I could use and gave the rest to coworkers in brown paper bags tied with string. Jordan and his wife invited me to their backyard barbecue in August. I brought lemon bars and a folding chair, and when their youngest daughter scraped her knee, I helped clean it up with the same steady hands I used at the hospital. None of these people had known me long, but they showed up. They offered kindness with no expectation in return. In therapy, Dr. Mercer helped me name what I was building. Not just routines or hobbies, but something deeper, a chosen family, one that didn't revolve around obligation or performance. She also helped me name the grief I still carried. The ache that lingered after family holidays passed without a call, or when I spotted something in a store I knew my mother would have loved but didn't buy. "You're creating safety now," she said once. "That takes time and boundaries." We talked about boundaries a lot. How to set them without guilt. How to maintain them without apology. My parents still reached out occasionally, a card on my birthday, a voicemail around Christmas. I answered when I felt ready. Sometimes we met for lunch, always on neutral ground, always with a clear ending. They didn't ask to visit. I didn't invite them. I never blocked their number. But I did silence the notifications. As for Tiffany, I didn't hear from her again for a while. The farmer's market run-in had been our only contact since the trial. I knew through my mother that she was still at the Arts Center, that she'd completed the treatment program and was attending regular meetings. I didn't ask for more. 2 years after the lawsuit, I hosted my first real house party. Nothing fancy, just a mix of neighbors, coworkers, and friends from pottery class. Natalie brought wine, Mrs. Chen brought dumplings, Jordan brought his grill. We ate in the backyard. Chance wandered from group to group, with his tail wagging and his tongue out collecting scraps and compliments. At one point, I stepped inside to grab more plates and caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked tired but content. Not polished, not perfect, just at ease. That night, as I washed dishes and stacked leftovers in the fridge, I thought about how far things had come. The silence that used to fill the house after guests left no longer felt heavy. It felt earned. My bedroom smelled faintly of lavender from the candle I'd lit earlier. The bed was unmade, the windows cracked open. The air had cooled. I sat in my reading nook and watched Chance curl up on the rug beside me. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for an apology, not for understanding, not for someone else to make it right. The next morning I made pancakes and ate them with fresh strawberries. I pulled weeds from the backyard, then visited the bookstore downtown. That's where I met Daniel. He was reaching for the same copy of a book on early American history. We both laughed and he let me take it. We ran into each other again a week later, this time at a local museum. He taught high school history, lived 3 neighborhoods over, and loved old buildings the way some people loved rescue dogs or coffee. On our 3rd date, we sat on my porch swing with mugs of tea. He asked about my house, and I told him the story not all at once, but enough. He didn't flinch. He didn't pity me. He just said, "That must have been really hard. Thank you for trusting me with it." We didn't move fast, but we moved steady. He met Natalie and her husband at a trivia night, helped Mrs. Chen carry potting soil across the street, tossed a tennis ball for Chance in the backyard until the dog flopped down, tongue out, completely worn. One evening in early fall, he stood in my kitchen and said, "Your home's beautiful." Not just the design, but the feeling. I didn't answer right away. I just looked around at the shelves, the colors, the open windows. Then I said, "It's taken a long time to feel like this." The first autumn wind carried the scent of distant rain and wood smoke. I stood in my kitchen watching leaves gather at the corners of the backyard, and I thought about how much had changed. It wasn't the house itself, though. Every room now reflected choices that belonged only to me, but the quiet confidence I felt walking through each doorway. I had learned to set the table for friends who valued me, to open the door for neighbors who came with laughter or advice and never with demands. In therapy, Dr. Mercer once said that home is not just a place, but a boundary. You build for yourself a shelter for your own dignity. It took time, but I began to believe her. The relationships I rebuilt with my parents settled into something smaller, cautious, but steady. There were still wounds, but I learned that forgiveness didn't have to mean letting my guard down completely. We met for lunch sometimes. We avoided talk of the past and shared stories of gardens and favorite recipes. Tiffany and I kept our distance. The air between us was calm, almost fragile, but it held no more blame. She found her own path, and I found peace in letting her walk it alone. Daniel and I continued at our own pace, long walks after work, Sunday breakfasts with the morning paper, quiet evenings with Chance sprawled at our feet. The life we built didn't hinge on anyone's approval, but our own. I found joy in the details, a handwritten note tucked by the coffee pot, a tomato still warm from the vine, a song drifting through open windows at dusk. Looking back, I saw that the hardest lesson wasn't how to win or hold on, but how to let go of old roles of burdens I never chose, of the idea that love must always come at my own expense. True justice, I realized, is knowing your worth and protecting it, even when others try to decide it for you. I hope my story reminds you that it's never selfish to draw a line, to say enough, or to choose yourself when no one else will. Sometimes the truest family is the one you make for yourself, with kindness, with boundaries, and with the quiet courage to start over as many times as it takes. Thank you for listening and sharing this journey with me. If you've ever had to defend your own dignity or found your way to a new kind of home, I hope you'll share your story too, or simply let someone else know they're not alone.